I think podcasts have gotten really, really popular because they're very portable. You know, you can listen while you're driving, you can listen while you're exercising. I think in many cases, especially for small businesses, podcasting is a very effective, efficient medium because
Meet Paige Arnof-Fenn, a marketing and branding expert who brings people, ideas, and brands together. From leading marketing at Zipcar and Inc.com to shaping Fortune 500 strategies, Paige has built and sold major companies. She now focuses on advising businesses and entrepreneurs to drive growth and success.
even if you're talking to micro influencers or nano influencers that are small businesses or in certain niches, podcasts can have a very loyal following. These are not Super Bowl budgets. You don't have to have a multi-million-dollar budget to enjoy the benefits of podcasting.
In your professional opinion, Paige, how does podcast play that role in PR specifically for brands? Why is it something you recommend your clients guesting on, for instance?
So I think the thing that is the most important today is...
Paige, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus. Can we begin off with a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Thank you, Guillaume, for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today. So my background is, I'm kind of a former corporate marketing person, big brands, Coca-Cola, Procter Gamble. I jumped into the internet world during Internet 1.0. I left my big corporate job in 1997 to go run marketing at a startup no one had ever heard of. My mother thought I was having a nervous breakdown. And I ended up doing 3 startups in a row. They all had good exits. And then
Nice.
right after 9/11, I hung out a shingle and I became an entrepreneur, starting my own marketing business. And here I am.
What made you leave the comfort of the Coca-Cola and the Procter Gamble of this world to go to startups? And what are you doing? So you were doing marketing there, right?
Yeah, I was in brand management at P&G. I was the assistant chief marketing officer at Coca-Cola, the most recognized brand in the world.
Literally.
Coke sold in like 200 countries around the world. It was an amazing job, an amazing opportunity. But when the internet started taking off, I was just seeing all this, all the stories all around me. And it was like the shiny object that was very distracting, and I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And, for my job at Coke, my husband was living in Washington, D.C. I was living in Atlanta because it was such a good job. I didn't want to miss it. And I was traveling all over the world all the time. And he was offered a job in Los Angeles. We had met out in California. And so I just put my toe in the water to look and see if there were maybe some internet jobs out there that looked interesting. And I found one that really just hit me right in my heart. And I just thought, this is exactly what I should be doing right now. So I interviewed,
Boom.
I got the job, and my husband and I met in Santa Monica, right by the beach, and got an apartment. And I quit my job at Coke on a Friday and started at the internet startup on a Monday morning across the country, 3,000 miles away. And I've never looked back. And I think what really hooked me on the internet world is that it was moving so fast. Internet 1.0, these companies were able to raise a lot of money. The company I had worked for first, they had raised like 30 or $40 million. Most of it was for marketing. And it was a really fun brand. In the music and entertainment space, I was a bit of a pop culture junkie. And I could see the vision of what they were trying to do and really helping them with their name, their logo, like the DNA of their brand. We were 5 blocks from the ocean. And I went from being kind of the young person in a corporate world to an old person in an internet startup. I was in my 30s, and, after wearing, suits and very formal attire all the way when I started my career originally on Wall Street and in corporate America, at the internet startup, I could wear jeans or shorts, like, you could wear whatever you wanted to work. People brought their dogs, had on flip-flops. I had never seen any work environment like that in my life, but it was really, really fun. And, it was basically a blank slate, and we could create the brand that we were excited to buy, and it was so much fun compared to the hierarchy and the structure and the rules of a big corporate public company job. So, it was just fun, and it was a wild ride.
I love the context, first of all. And I'd say you've seen it all, right? In terms of careers, you've seen the big corporates, you've seen the small, bootstrapped and funded startup, and you've seen having your own business. What I'm a bit curious about is how have you seen, so not necessarily how marketing changes from big corporation to startups, right? Obviously, the challenges are different, the impact you want to have is different. But how have you seen PR and marketing methods evolve since you started your career all the way to today in 2025?
So, in some ways, the basics still apply. You've gotta have a great story to tell, you need to be very thoughtful and strategic about building your brand. Who's the audience? What are the right features? What are the right benefits? You know, Pick a few things and do them really well, be consistent. That never changes. But a lot of other things have changed. I mean, when I started at Procter& and Gamble and Coca-Cola, there were really only a few places to spend money. It was television, radio, print, and outdoor advertising. That was it. And with TV, there was no streaming. There was, you had network television. It was just a lot more streamlined and a lot more focused. And when you work for a Procter& and Gamble or a Coca-Cola, the budgets you're working with are enormous. And when you do market research, it's statistically significant. You're talking to more than 1,000 people, and it takes months to field the research. You do quantitative research, you do qualitative research. You can't just do one focus group, you have to do them in different parts of the world, and, you're testing so many different things. When you work for an internet startup, you don't have as much money, and the world is moving so quickly with these venture-backed technology businesses. If you took 6 months to do market research, the market would have completely changed by the time you got your results back. The startup that I started with in Los Angeles, when the team came in the morning, we would meet out at the conference room with our coffee, come up with a bunch of things we wanted to learn that day, and we looked at who our target audience was,
Yeah.
which was generally, younger men, kind of 18 to 24, and if you saw somebody on a skateboard with piercings and tattoos, we're like, "Great, that's our audience." Like I said, we were 5 blocks from the beach, and if you know anything about Santa Monica, there's something called the Strand, which is where people walk along the beach, and there's lots of shops and restaurants, and so, we'd come up, people would get to work, we'd sit in the conference room drinking coffee, coming up with a bunch of new ideas for banner ads or things that we wanted to do on the website, and we'd mock them up. The creative guys would do a quick and dirty, and we'd go out to the Strand at lunch, and we'd spread out along the beach with clipboards and kinda show and tell, and we'd intercept anybody that looked like they were our target audience, and we offered them CDs or baseball hats or T-shirts and say, "Will you answer a couple of questions? Can you spend 5 minutes and take a look at something?" And then we'd spend a couple hours on the beach, we'd come back to the conference room in the afternoon, we'd tally up our votes, and before we left that night, we would put up the winning anything that got a lot of votes, we'd put it up online that night, and the next morning, we'd get coffee, come back, and we'd read the results in real time, and we could iterate very quickly, like, "That didn't work, let's try it this way. This worked, why did it work? Let's find out some more stuff today." And so in a few days, you did your entire market research. It was not statistically significant. We did not spend very much money. We were giving away freebies from the office. but we learned in real time kind of what was compelling, what were the messages that got people to pay attention, what motivated our audience to click on something or buy something, or what did they want to learn more about? And that was just really exciting to me. It was fun and crazy. I mean, if you grew up in a system that was very formal and you had to write a memo a certain way and get your boss's approval, and then you had to get a meeting together and get people to approve it. And, then you had to ask for the budget and then you had to structure what the research was gonna, look like and where it just, it got kind of took on a life of its own. And once you get a taste of the quick and dirty, wild west of the internet, I was hooked. I don't think I thought I would ever be able to go back to a big corporate job, and I think the big question in my mind, because I had always worked for big companies so that when you give someone your business card, they're very impressed when you call people or send them an email, you've got this 800-pound gorilla supporting you because they understand, like, "Oh, she's calling from Coca-Cola or, Procter& and Gamble. They're the leader in our category." But when you work for an internet startup that no one's ever heard of before, is anyone gonna return your calls? Will anybody take a meeting with you? And this was 1997 when I started, and, I think a lot of people were reading the articles and watching these young companies come out of nowhere and do crazy things, and what I loved was that I realized I was part of the DNA of this brand, like, I was helping create this new business from nothing, and the businesses I worked on at Coke and P&G, some of them were more than 100 years old, and I think the youngest brand I worked on was more than 30 years old. So, there's a lot of inertia, that ball is rolling downhill with or without you, but every day I could look at what was happening at the startup and think, my team did that, like, we created that, and within less than 2 years, we went public and we were sold to Yahoo, so it was really fast and fun, and I learned so much, and it wasn't scary to fail because we failed all the time. We were learning all the time, but it was just part of this energy and this momentum where, it was young and exciting and fun. And like I said, I was one of the oldest. I was older than the 2 guys who founded the company, and I
Interesting.
was only in my 30s, so early 30s.
That's great. So if I understand properly, right, when it comes to a very marketing standpoint, so maybe more fulfillment of seeing the fruits of your labor fast, right, in a more fast-paced startup where you're testing lots of things, failing a lot of times, but then when it works, it's like big impact. So when I look at Coca-Cola, Procter and Gamble, the challenge in marketing, right, is being right 99% of the time because you have such a big budget and the stakes are that high. But then you're gonna make a decision process much longer because you need to be right 99% of the time. Whereas startups, it's basically on a daily basis. You're completely okay with being wrong as long as you test, iterate, learn, and do better the day after from the data that you've collected of the test the day before. Is that a proper summary of like how marketing works depending on the size of the company? What's the principle are the same?
Yes and no. I mean, the truth is P&G and Coke work very different today, I think, than they did when I was there, in the early days. So that I think is a fact. And the internet, really was not there when I was, starting my marketing career at P&G. And there were not, like I said, no social media, no influencers, no Facebook, like 500 stations and streaming and all the possibilities that you have now. So it's a very different world today. And, the great thing about these big corporate jobs, Fortune 500, you have big budgets and you can sponsor the Olympics, you can sponsor the Super Bowl. It's kind of lazy. I mean, these are consumer products that appeal to the masses, and it's a very good way to reach a mass market. The internet startups I worked for had very niche markets, they were much tighter. So they couldn't afford to do a Super Bowl ad or be a Olympic sponsor, but they weren't talking to everybody anyway. I think when you have very tiny budgets, you get very scrappy and resourceful. You get very good at guerrilla marketing and doing more with less. And my own personal bias, I did a lot more advertising when I was at P&G and G and Coke. Advertising is very expensive though for big mass marketed brands. When you're working with scrappy VC-backed startups, I was doing a lot more PR, doing earned media because, you're trying to get out there and get noticed and get mentioned in articles, get mentioned online, get out there speaking and getting quoted in articles so that people know that you're existing. Get your URL out there. Make sure people are clicking on something in an article and learning about you. You know, everybody knew about Coca-Cola. Everybody knows the P&G brands. Those are the top brands in every category they compete in. Nobody had ever heard of these VC-backed startups when I started there, and we were just relentless about doing as much as we could with a very small budget. And fortunately, because they were interesting stories and we found great ways to tell them, we broke through the clutter. We got out there on a very shoestring budget, and all three of the brands ended up getting bought, going public,
Yeah.
and people did learn about them, and those stories did get told. So it's just a very different challenge, I think. When you have a legacy business, you inherit a lot of the brand history and the brand stories. When you're creating something from nothing, you can try and do a lot and you don't have all the legacy. You can start fresh, and there's a lot of excitement around that.
Talk to me about podcasts. How do you see it play a role in that legacy building? Is that something that you've seen or experimented with at the startups or before at Coca-Cola and Procter and Gamble? Like, what's your view on podcasting in general for marketing and PR, and how have you seen it evolve and be useful?
So podcasts were not even on my radar at P&G and Coke. I think
Fair
now,
enough.
yeah, now absolutely. I'm sure they're doing a lot of podcasting there, especially with influencers who, they're working with the brands. Today, my clients and me for my business, podcasting is a very effective, efficient medium because, again, even if you're talking to micro influencers or nano influencers that are small businesses or in certain niches, a podcast can have a very loyal following. And once those conversations get recorded, they can get picked up and repurposed. You can put them in newsletters. You can, you know, get them up on your favorite platforms, and, they can take off like wildfire. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting to me now that, it seems like every celebrity has their own podcast now. I think podcasts have gotten really, really popular because they're very portable. You can listen while you're driving, you can listen while you're exercising. Many of them both record video and audio. It's a very flexible option, and I think people love stories. They love conversations. It's like eavesdropping on a friend's conversation, and you're gonna learn something, and you hear about things that you've been interested in, and the fact that you can do it while you're multitasking, if you're cleaning your apartment, if you're taking a walk or taking a run or a bike ride, you can do it while you're doing other things. And I just feel like I know for my own self, I probably listen to snippets of or full podcasts, I don't know, 3 or 4 times a week because there are just so many interesting people out there doing cool stuff, and I wanna hear about it, I wanna learn more. I mean, the truth is, I loved being a student, I'm kind of insatiable curiosity, I love learning, and I feel like When you find people that are simpatico, people that you admire, people you respect, so many of them, if they don't have their own podcast, they've been a guest on somebody else's. And it's just fun to be able to follow what they're up to. And I know for me, again, if you're on Apple or Spotify or YouTube and you start listening to certain ones, you'll start getting notices of other ones that are similar. And that to me is just really fun because if you like something like X, you'll probably like Y and Z too. So I'm always discovering new podcasts and I love it. I mean, I think they're very efficient. And again, these are not Super Bowl budgets. You don't have to have a multi-million dollar budget to enjoy the benefits of podcasting. And you can put your toe in the water. You can be a guest on other people's podcasts without having to do the heavy lifting. Or, if you're excited and you have a vision and the energy and motivation, you can set up your own. And they're great people like you that really can be the Sherpa that kind of helps people out and shows them the ropes. But I love guesting on podcasts because I just have met so many interesting people, had so many great conversations, and I learn from every single one that I listen to.
I love this. How does it, so for a brand specifically, right? I would like us to get a bit tactical here. How do you see, so obviously back in like 2000s and even 10 years after that, podcast wasn't really a thing. I mean, it was basically the genesis of it with a few actors that are still in the space, but it wasn't a thing yet. But now in 2025, where we see, so there is like a gazillion solicitations each and every day for each and everybody, right? There is so many channels that you can go on. There is anybody claiming everything on the internet. In your professional opinion, Paige, how does podcast play that role in PR specifically for brands to push them forward in a non-pushy way? Like what's your analysis of that and why those podcasts work as a phenomenon? Why is it something you recommend your clients guesting on, for instance?
I think you have to do your homework and find the ones that really overlap with your interests and your values. Like when you find ones that are simpatico, those are the ones that work best. I don't necessarily look at just like what are the highest ratings or, I think in many cases, especially for small businesses, those nano influencers, those micro brands like that are talking to exactly your target audience. It might not have the highest number of followers or listeners, but those are the people specifically. It could be your primary, secondary, or tertiary audience where you can really drill in the messages that are going to matter to them. And you have to look at not just who buys your product or service, but who are all the people around that, the gatekeepers? Who are the other people who might need to be aware of what you're doing and see the benefits so that they support the people making the decision to pull the trigger and buy your product and service? So, when you're putting together a thought leadership program, a PR strategy, you need to meet people where they are and think about how people like to be introduced and how they like to learn about things. Some people like to read, some people like to watch, some people like to listen. And so you want to do a analysis of like, how am I going to reach these people in the most efficient way possible where they're already hanging out, like fish in the pond where the fish are. Feed the dog food it wants to eat. You don't have to recreate the wheel. And, there are a lot of services out there that help you kind of slice and dice and find, and again, I'm my antenna's always up. I'm always chatting with people, and I love asking people, "Tell me your favorite podcast. What have you been listening to?" I look at sites like Pod Snacks. I don't know if you've heard of that, but they will give you little synopsises of some of the more more high profile named podcasts, they'll tell you who the guests are. And you can just, quickly in your inbox, read a couple of paragraphs a day or a couple of times a week. And you can see, ooh, that looks interesting, or that's a great topic. And, especially now with AI and, I think you can set things up so that you can be alerted anytime, even Google alerts, if there are people you're interested in, who are the thought leaders? Where are they showing up? And you deconstruct, like, how did the best clients and customers find you? Where are they hanging out? What do they like to see and do? And then, you can see the strengths and weaknesses. This is working. This is not working. But I feel like you're crazy not to explore that right now today, because there are so many people doing it in very, like I said, some people love it on YouTube or on video. Other people just do the audio. And it's funny, like, I noticed recently there's some TV people who have been very, very popular. They won all the TV awards, the Emmys, and they're all doing audio podcasts. They're not doing video because they feel like, they don't want the distraction of having their face out there. It's their voice. They want their voice to be heard. They want to have the conversations. And I've loved getting to know some people that you thought you knew from TV in a very different way. So you have to decide again what's authentic to you. Where do you showcase your strengths in the very best way? And if you dig a little bit, do your homework, I am sure you can find a handful of podcasts. And for me, I love talking to people. So it definitely plays to my strengths.
And it shows. It shows because when you are well spoken, which I think is something that you practice early on in the United States, that's a bit different in France. So that's something I'm experiencing right now. This comes naturally. And as long as you have something interesting to say in the sense of this is going to be valuable for someone in the industry, you're leading with value, right? Because in a sense, the podcast content is long form, right? It's not going to be a 30-second short that you're going to consume and then scroll past through. But it's also not something where you're going to bombard people of ads and like, hey, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. It's about long-term relationship building, trust building. And then when you make an ask, or you don't even have to, because people naturally come to you because of the fact that you have provided them with so much value over such a long period of time. So what would you recommend now to podcasters and wannabe podcasters? How would you see, the question I like to ask, let's put it this way, is what is true today that will be true in 10 years? Let's tweak it a bit. In PR, that people should double down on.
The thing that is the most important today is authenticity, especially in this AI world that we live in. I think the way that brands are going to stand out and be remembered, and the people behind those brands, is you have to tell your authentic stories. Where did you come from? What's your background? Give that origin story. Talk about the good, the bad, the ugly. Talk about what happened in the trenches. Be vulnerable, because robots can only kind of cut and paste what's already out there. They don't have, these war stories of like the highs and the lows. And so, again, when we started chatting and I said the basics of marketing are still true, they're always going to be true. If you have a great story to tell, find the right platform and venue to tell your story. And again, be authentically you, because that's what's going to come out, and that's what people are going to connect to on an emotional level. That's what's going to build your brand and give you kind of the space in your audience's brain, so that when they have a problem that your product or service can help them solve, you want them to think of you first. We were talking about this before and you just mentioned it, like, share what you know, share the good, the bad, the ugly, because you are helping other people. And I feel like, the great thing about all these online options today is it's not super expensive. You don't need a Super Bowl budget to get started and to get going on these things. And you plant lots of seeds. And every conversation, if you leave the audience with 1, 2 new thoughts that help them, if they don't remember anything else, they had one idea that thought, wow, I should try that, or I never thought of it that way. And you keep planting those seeds, once they're archived online, they'll be there forever. And people can keep coming back and send the links, refer the links. They could put it in their newsletter, they can blog about it, tweet about it. And the good karma, you pay it forward. And before you know it, you have all these people that you didn't even know about that know about you because they got a great idea based on something that you shared or you told them about. And you warned them it could backfire. And this is what happened if I didn't do it right. Oh my goodness, this was a nightmare. But then we got it fixed. And here's how it turned around. And it was so much better, and people, like, they laugh with you, they cry with you, and I think that human connection, that emotional bond is really how you create brands that people love and they remember. If you're just talking about the same things in the same way with the same hashtags, it's a commodity. You can't charge a premium if all you're doing is rehashing the same kind of blather that everybody else is doing. So be careful. I think AI is a great tool, and I think it definitely has benefits when you wanna brainstorm, when you want something to someone to read something that's even tighter, or, there are benefits, but don't use AI to be the end point. It's basically polish, You've got to share the things that are uniquely you, that are unique, special, and different about your brand, that only you can share and only you can know. If you do that, you're gonna be very relevant 10 years from now. People will still know you, they'll still love you, and they'll keep coming back for more. But if you're just using all the same recycled stuff, you're gonna be a commodity down the road.
Amen to that. Paige, ladies and gentlemen. Paige, if people want to find out more about you or see what you do, where should they go?
Website, mavensandmoguls.com. It's mavensandmoguls.com. Or go to LinkedIn, and you'll see my last name is hyphenated. On LinkedIn, it's all smushed together. Or you can just Google Paige and Mavens, and I'll pop right up. Thank goodness for search engine optimization.
Amazing. Paige, thank you so much for coming on Podcast Gurus.
Thank you. It's been fun chatting with you today.